It is problematic for side opposition to stand up and simply deny the racist vitriol that is not only endemic when we look at actual examples of right-wing populists on the ground, the Front National in France, Trump in the United States, Duterte in the Philippines, Geert Wilders in the Netherlands, the list goes on. But second of all, when we give you three mechanisms in our first speech as to why this kind of racist vitriol is not only endemic and the result of the fact that you have a very wide, very shallow coalition, but second of all, is almost inevitably transferred to the minorities about whom it is made. That's not good enough from side opposition in this debate. I'm going to bring you an argument as to how right-wing populism constitutes a fundamental affront to democracy and the rights of everyone else in a democracy who does not vote for these people. But before that, 5 pieces of rebuttal. The first thing they say is that minorities don't actually feel afraid. And the only evidence they give for this in their first speech is, oh, you have some African-American women retweeting anti-Trump tweets. 2 responses. First, they do not engage with the 3 lines we bring you in our first speech as to how it is actually horrific to have someone who is in their political incentives to stand up and say that you are a less valuable human being than someone else. But I challenge side opposition to tell the women who are raped by Duterte's army because he legitimizes that, or, for example, the women who face race-based abuse in the United States as a direct response of Trump's riots, the Mexicans who are beaten up after Trump rallies, that they shouldn't be afraid in any meaningful sense of the word. Second thing they bring us is that these are voicing concerns that would otherwise be avoided. 4 responses here. First, they concede in their very generic characterization of freedom of speech that, and when they stand up and say we support things like hate speech, that there are circumstances under which we are happy to tell people that they cannot vote for a particular individual. That is, if we can prove to you that the harms to the wider society, i.e. the democratic norms of that society and specific minority groups, are undermined. That is why they themselves do not believe that people should be able to vote for the neo-Nazi party. And in doing so, they concede that democracy has to operate within a range. Second of all, they give us no analysis of why specifically addressing the concerns of these people is unique to right-wing populists and rather just right-wing movements. We are pointing to, for example, the Republican Party in the US, the Conservatives in the United Kingdom, groups that attack the very kinds of policies that they stand for on their side of the house, things like having tighter immigration controls, but do so without saying that Mexicans are rapists. Third, this falls down because they fundamentally have to prove to you that the benefits accrued to these people are actually achieved. We gave you structural analysis in our first speech that has not been responded to as to how the shallowness of your coalition necessarily means you do not help the people in the Rust Belt. You do not help the people who fundamentally give you their democratic mandate. Third point of rebuttal, they say these are legitimate policies. Again, 2 responses. First, we would challenge the factual legitimacy of lots of the policies that individuals like Duterte or Trump have passed, because the vast majority of them are not restricting trade or placing limits on the power of big businesses or giving more welfare to the working man. They are instead avoided because they recognize there is inherent conflict between supporting Obamacare for those that want it and also not supporting Obamacare for those in your mandate who do not want it. The kinds of policies you actually get passed are the ban on trans individuals in the army, the ban on Muslims from particular countries, because those are the ones it is easiest to unite your base behind. Second of all, again, this is predicated on these policies actually being fulfilled and people actually wanting them. We point to the example of the fact that only 28% of United States citizens now support Donald Trump as evidence of the fact that no matter what he says about these policies, he's probably not implementing them. Fourth and finally of all, they throw out this really generic argument about how this policy could possibly be abused because of the vague criteria we implement. We tell you that the courts make exactly this kind of calculation the whole time. And you know how we know that's effective? Because they stand by exactly the same mechanism when they talk about things like slander, when they talk about things like hate speech, when they talk about things like incitement to violence. If you can disseminate specific criteria and attach them to those instances of racial abuse, presumably you can also attach them to the 5 criteria we brought you in our first speech. Before I move on to my argument about how right-wing populism is fundamentally a affront to everyone's rights, yes.
Would you also prosecute every single person who calls those in the Rust Belt immoral, horrible neo-Nazi?
Come on, this obviously operates on a scale, right? So on the smaller end of things, if an individual person is racist and inciting other people to go and physically harm someone else, then possibly. If that person does so with 100,000 Twitter followers and the direct response to that policy is that hate crime increases 41% in the week after they are elected, yes. Okay, my argument, right-wing populism and the affront to democracy. We think right-wing populism undermines the integrity of democracy and is therefore a threat to the democratic rights of all. 2 strands. First, it poisons real democratic debate. there are a couple of pieces of context we need to understand for this argument to make sense. First, right-wing populists abuse the truth and shift their stances. That is because they have broad but shallow coalitions brought together by conflicting vague promises, i.e. they promise simultaneously to slash Obamacare, but also to provide welfare to those in need. We put you the example of Duterte as someone who literally has a team of 20 people hired to act as internet trolls and spread misinformation on the internet. Second of all, they dress up their opponents as conspiratorial elites and fundamentally use that as a tool to not engage with them. They demonize their portrayal of their opponents. And as a consequence, when you try and challenge someone like Duterte or Trump or Geert Wilders on their prejudices, the response you get is, see, look, this is exactly what the liberal media is doing time and time again. Third thing on this, they rely on propagating fear and prejudice. Again, because they cannot unite their coalition through legitimate policy, because the people they draw together are drawn under vague and conflicting terms, they are reliant on common fears and prejudices. The takeaway from this argument is that the key tenet, the key appeal of lots of these individuals is inherently irrational. That is to say, they rely on the propagation of a fear that probably should not exist. All of these fundamentally undermine the debate necessary to productive, competitive electoral politics. Why? First, because when you twist and muddy the truth of a debate, you challenge the reality in response to which that debate existed in the first place. When fake news and alternative facts are placed on the same pedestal as actual factual realities, you cannot have a functional discussion about certain issues. You cannot have a functional discussion about undocumented workers in the United States when it is a fact that Mexicans are rapists, in the same way that it is a fact that Nieto is the president of Mexico. Second of all, likewise, you also cannot have a debate between two reasonable sides that engage with each other and provide for the voter fundamentally a response. That is, which of these two options is probably better for your interests. When one of those sides systematically fails to engage with the other, both are the consequence of the fact that they use literally who those other people are as a way of attacking them rather than attacking their policies. When second of all, they have terrorized the people that support them and struck fear into their hearts to the extent that they will not hear logical reason. Second strand of this argument is that these individuals attack the very framework of democracy. Part of their anti-establishment narrative on which they rely is to attack institutions like courts, like electoral processes. That is why we see individuals like Geert Wilders in the Netherlands and Donald Trump not only threatening to punish the courts if they get into power, but refusing to accept election results. Insofar as democracy relies on the balance of power that is supported both by the fact that you give a massive mandate to the individual you give your vote to, but also by the fact that there are some checks and balances by an independent body to stop that person abusing that power, democracy is fundamentally perverted when justices and courts are fundamentally too afraid to do their job. The takeaway of this whole argument is twofold. First, if you weigh this debate based on democratic integrity and the rights of individuals, the very presence of right-wing populists makes it harder for people on the ground to come to terms with who they are voting for, why they are supporting that person, and ultimately what they should draw out of that. We would draw the analogy to perjury, and so far we're happy to limit free speech in the short term if it ensures the integrity of a process that is vital to our society in the long run. So proud to propose.
The second proposition speaker spent 8 minutes, 8 seconds. I thank the second proposition speaker for their speech.